Before I get into this video, let me put out a disclaimer. I'm not going to talk about Joanne Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, and her politics. In the last couple of years, Rowling has decided to join the political discourse by aligning herself with the hateful movement of trans-exclusive radical feminism, or TERF. What started out as a series of just asking questions with controversial statements that came from a genuine place of worry slowly devolved into a rhetoric of hatred. For example, Rowling has gone on record calling the elevation of gender into a protected status from discrimination a direct attack on women. I think Rowling's opinions come out of a genuine fear of worsening women's lives, not hatred of trans folks, but that doesn't matter when they have the effect of transphobia. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. However, I'm not interested in morally weighing up the sum of Rowling's misdeeds against her good deeds to see if she is a good person or not. As my media literacy grew, I came to accept how flawed the original Harry Potter books are. I still like them though. But viewing Rowling's body of work as a whole, I am comfortable with saying that she is a hack author who caught lightning in a bottle with the original 7 books and is highly unlikely to write anything of value again. If you want to boycott her, go ahead, I support you. If you, despite it all, find comfort in the walls of Hogwarts because you grew up with it, I support you too. Trans people deserve to live happy and safe lives without hating themselves and without being constantly attacked for who they are. If you are against that, then I don't support you. You can like Hogwarts and be trans. You can also dislike it. Rowling is long past the point of caring about money, so buying or pirating Hogwarts Legacy is a personal choice with personal consequences more than anything else. Luckily, deconstructing Harry Potter has become a genre of its own as the kids that grew up on it became adults, so if you want a few pieces on Harry Potter and Rowling, here you go. You will find links to these in the description. I'm always happy to see people engage with my content in the comments, but please keep it to the content of this video and not Rowling. I will not be responding to anything to do with the author and will try to be actively deleting comments that try to turn this into a debate on the author. Hogwarts Legacy was bound to be a success. Very few games can rely on the nostalgia of an entire generation, but Legacy is one of them. In the early 2000s, everyone was reading Harry Potter, even people who weren't reading books usually. Especially young kids in the age range of the main characters, especially outsiders. Harry was an outsider, and turns out all the outsiders who loved reading about him met at the bookstore at midnight when the next book was due to release, or in the earliest internet forums.
I don't think I can do
The near-yearly cadence and long running of the main books made it easy to grow up on them. The setting of an alternate reality school and their whimsical adventure coupled with the easy-to-read writing style made the series a smash hit with children and casual readers. The attempt, if clumsy, to make the books thematically darker and grapple with more serious topics as time went on made the adventures of Harry Potter, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger perfect to grow up on. Without question, it firmly placed Hogwarts, the magical school of witchcraft and wizardry, in the hearts of millions. 20 years passed, and the love became only stronger as nostalgia was added to the mix. The earlier Harry Potter video games were easy cash grabs, a more complex version of branded merchandise not worth talking about. People were always screaming for a Harry Potter video game not confined by the plot of the books. Something about Hogwarts itself, the magical childhood castle. So when Legacy leaked in 2018 and was formally announced a few years later, the people who had been waiting for years for new Harry Potter content heralded its release like the coming of the Messiah. You see, despite its popularity, Harry Potter as a franchise doesn't actually have a lot in it. Since the last movie released in 2011, what the fandom got was 2 small books written for charity, one on the history of Quidditch and the other around magical animals, and much later a god-awful play that was only saved by what can be described as an insane amount of production. It was good despite the script, not because of it. And let's not even talk about the mess that is Fantastic Beasts. That's a whole other discussion. So the people who had been stuck for 15 years in subreddits and forums discussing if the only complex character of the entire franchise was a good or a bad person had finally something to look forward to. But not just them. Everyone who had since moved on, for whom Hogwarts was a memory of their childhood while they sat in college classes or toiled away already in the workforce, had something to look forward to, too. But not just them either. All the parents that had read Harry Potter to their children and during it fallen in love with the world just as much as their kids, comfortable, late in their careers, retirement in sight, they had something to look forward to, too. Harry Potter has a power that goes beyond the mere brand. It's a lifestyle. It's a culture that transcends borders. You can't attach the name Microsoft to a dress and expect it to sell. You can't make an Under Armour laptop. But you can with Harry Potter. And you can absolutely do that with a video game. The first video game marketed on the promise that you'll finally be able to explore Hogwarts on your own terms, this second home to so many outsiders around the world. Together, these fans, many of them for the first time, bought a AAA video game. They bought computers. They bought consoles. Together, they dethroned Call of Duty as the best-selling video game of 2023, a streak that either a Rockstar game or Call of Duty has held for 14 consecutive years. They bought so much that it was still the second best-selling video game of 2024 in the United Kingdom, easily crossing the 2 billion British pound mark, or if you use the sensible system of measurement, kilograms. Together, they put the game designers into one hell of a bind. How the hell do you make a game for people who don't play games? Every game, not just video game, has something called a core gameplay loop. That refers to the shortest repeating action you do while playing. In Super Mario Bros., you run to the right side and jump, collecting power-ups along the way. In Pac-Man, you navigate a labyrinth, avoiding ghosts and collecting points. It's these half-minute or so loops that make a game. And if you nail making them satisfying, then you have the basis for a great game. As games have become more complex, additional gameplay loops have interlinked with this original gameplay loop. In Witcher 3, the core gameplay loop is fighting, but additional loops are traversing and exploring the world, making choices during conversations to change how the story progresses, and of course the actual main gameplay loop.
Up for a few rounds of Gwent?
Games have eclipsed the singular gameplay loop, but it is still the foundation on which a great game is built. If it doesn't feel right, players will leave. Hogwarts Legacy's core gameplay loop is fighting through spellcasting. That's a good call, and it feels snappy and good to pull off even if it is a little on the easier side. But remember, we have to bring everyone along, even the absolute lunatics who built a top-of-the-line PC for multiple €1,000 to play this game. As someone who plays a lot of games, I think the devs maintained that balance of easy to get into but challenging enough to be satisfying. It's a good answer to our question of how to design a game for non-gamers. Legacy has a basic spell attack that you can button mash to deal damage. To spice things up, you can access named spells like Leviosa, Confringo or Depulso to either move enemies around, levitate them or stun them so that your basic attack deals more damage, or set them on fire so they take periodic damage. To make things even more spicy, the named spells are color-coded, and human enemies use shield charms to protect them from your basic attacks. These shields are color-coded as well, and you need to use the right color of spell to break the shield and be able to damage them. Your defensive measures are a shield charm in turn, which allows you to protect yourself and counter incoming attacks, or for attacks which cannot be countered, dodge roll out of the way. All in all, the developers have done everything right designing this rock, paper, scissors type system. Like the majority of Legacy, it is more influenced by the movies than the books, but that's not always a bad thing. They have done the basics right, like ensuring that even though dodging always works and countering only sometimes, countering is rewarded more so that the player is not conditioned to always dodge. And then they broke it. I will get into the problematic plot aspects of this later, but Legacy has a big focus on so-called ancient magic, a type of magic that only the player character can do, and that in combat manifests in two big ways. Fighting charges up an ancient magic meter, which you can use to execute even full health, shield charmed standard enemies in one hit, or deal massive amount of damage to bigger enemies and bosses. From a gameplay perspective, this is alright. It rewards you engaging with the mechanics, and I understand the desire to quicken combat because the premise of the gameplay loop is that you're usually alone taking on big groups. But I would solve this with reducing the enemy count instead, because fighting so many enemies at the same time destroys my immersion. However, at least this ability makes sense from a gameplay perspective and only causes more problems from the story perspective. The second aspect is more problematic. Even with your ancient magic meter depleted, you can at any point telepathically pick up objects in your environment and throw them at your enemies. This too will shatter their shields and stun them and deal a load of damage on top. The mechanic itself feels very inspired by the game Control, and just like in Control, it is very fun. The problematic aspect here is that it completely breaks the rock, paper, scissors approach, because basically every environment contains throwable stuff, and because it breaks shields. What the developers have considered when balancing dodging and countering against each other is completely thrown out of the window here. The telepathic throw is a singular button press, requires very basic aim to execute, and is always available. Outside of combat. Inside of it, you even learn the Pulso, a spell which throws enemies back, and the game specifically teaches you to combine with lifting them, so they fly off cliffs or into trees and walls to deal heavy damage. It's not like the lore doesn't cover this ability, aside of the fact that it's so loosely defined you could have just come up with something new. The one justification that I see is that it would turn the satisfying single button throw into something more involved, likely casting at least 2 spells, but the game already solves this elsewhere. Outside of combat, when you Axio something, once you learn Wingardium Leviosa, you immediately cast that as a follow-up once the object reaches you, without requiring another button press. To summarize, the game introduces a rock, paper, scissors system and then hands you a shotgun to go have fun with it. Interlinked with the core combat loop are other gameplay loops. Now, most of these are harmless, even if they tend to fall into the open world clutter bin rather than being anything meaningful. If you don't like the stealth mechanics, you can not engage with them, though it is very useful if you're fighting human bosses because for some reason the stealth kill works on them, which is just incredibly funny. Side note, it's hilarious that the game goes out of its way to make clear that the stealth kills are non-lethal while you run around turning people into spiders and stomping on them. Others, for example potion brewing or herbology, can be a meaningful part for some to realize their fantasy of being at Hogwarts. I ended up not needing them at all beyond challenges that specifically called for them, but they can be entertaining. Collecting magical animals to protect them from poachers is the side activity I engaged with the most, because caring for cute animals is fun.
Editing Bo here, sorry for the short pause. A funny aspect of this entire anti-poacher or animal rescuing thing is that in Hogsmeade there is actually a seller you can sell your extra animals to, who says she'll find them a good home, but you never actually see it confirmed, so really you're also poaching the animals and just trusting on this random ass person telling you that everything is gonna be fine.
There are, however, 2 loops that are central and unavoidable, and unfortunately are personal pet peeves of mine. However, I think I can also make the argument for their lack of purpose from an objective point of view. Shit, I just made air quotes. Even worse, I can't understand how they solve the central question of bringing every Potterhead along, gamer or not. I'm talking about the gear and leveling systems. Let's take them one at a time. For some reason, Hogwarts Legacy has an RPG-style gear system. What does that mean? That means that thrown around the world are items that you can find, collect and equip. These give you certain bonuses. However, because each item being unique would be unrealistic, items are copy-pasted, where identical items can be found but with differing bonuses and level requirements and rarities. Now, this inclusion baffles me completely. It doesn't keep things simple, nor does it cement player progression. The core gameplay loop, aside of the throwing items mechanic, is well designed, but the gear system is lazy. The rarities have no relation to the actual item and are instead an indicator of how good the item is for the level requirement that it has. That means that you'll be finding legendary scarves at level 4 that are going to be identical look-wise to another scarf you'll find 3 levels later with a different bonus. Legendary items should be legendary. That's the entire point. They should be unique, they should be special and one of a kind, often with a story or quest attached to getting them, so that you can think back on the troubles you went through to get this really good item. Unfortunately, that's not possible because the gear system in Legacy is strictly related to 2 numerical only stats: offense and defense. They are not cool, they are not interesting, they just increase the damage you deal and decrease the damage that you take. Finding a new item is not a good feeling, it's a bad feeling. Because now that I found this item where one number is bigger than the other one I currently have equipped, I have to stop what I'm doing, go into the menu, equip this new item, go back out of the menu, most of the time go into a different menu so that I can change the visual appearance of the new item that I just equipped, because visual appearances are thankfully separately changeable, but for some reason not tied to your character, but tied to the equipped item, so swapping it ruins your look. This is not a refined system at all. It fails to implement the actual point of a gear system, and unlike potions or herbology, which can mostly be ignored if you don't like them, you have to be constantly swapping out your gear or to not die in one hit in combat. So it takes you out of the game figuratively, by having hats that somehow make you deal more damage, and literally by forcing you to click through menus all the time. But what do I mean with the point of a gear system? Well, the games that championed these are RPGs like World of Warcraft or action RPGs like Diablo or Path of Exile, have an actual thought behind it. In those games, the point of this random loot system is that you aspire to create a build, a combination of equipped items that makes your character do something new or makes them do something incredibly efficiently. For example, equipping a helmet that improves lightning damage, gauntlets that make you shoot lightning when you punch people, and then a cloak that causes the lightning to arc between enemies so that you can clear out large numbers faster. In games which do this properly, you might find the helmet first, which would be useless by itself, but it might get you to think what else is hiding in this dungeon and get you to explore. Slowly, you'd find other lightning items, and then you'd connect the dots and try to take them out at the same time and realize how much better you are at killing hordes of enemies. I'm not the best defender of this sort of gameplay either way, because it's not what I dig in any game, but what I'm saying is that Hogwarts Legacy has an especially poor implementation of it, either way. Random loot only works because among the clutter of mostly uninteresting items you have are there interesting ones. But Hogwarts Legacy only has uninteresting items, and you can't ignore them because they ruin your style and you have to venture into the menus all the time to equip them. Legacy completely fails on all fronts in this regard. Gear does not facilitate exploration, the items lack anything interesting by itself and don't change at all how you play. The game would have been better if it didn't have this system at all. Keep the cosmetic customization, but remove everything else. A large part of what makes Harry Potter work is that the main character is an ordinary abused boy who's whisked away into this magical alternate reality and this grand interesting school in a castle. A world where everything is interesting and where for once he is treated in a special way because he is special. Added on top is the fact that Hogwarts is a school where you are supposed to learn things and quite literally progress. To abstract progression into a mere leveling system is an uncreative and lazy way to solve the question of how to gamify Hogwarts. You are at fucking Hogwarts, which is brilliantly realized and which you get to explore to your heart's content with all its interesting corners and secrets. And the best you can come up with is experience points per enemy killed. Do you not remember all the jokes of book readers saying how they just love to do homework at Hogwarts and how they cannot understand how Ron and Harry hate doing it? And the best you can do is number go up? Not to mention how, aside of lazy game design, you are building a system which rewards specific things. If you give people a hammer and only allow them to bash other people's heads in instead of building a house with it, they're gonna do that. The game barely rewards other activities. Sure, you can capture magical animals to save them from poachers, and if you take care of them, you get resources out of them you can use to upgrade your gear. But I never found the upgrades useful. The constant gear switching discourages investing time into a specific item anyhow, and they are plain boring because they just increase offense or defense. I need to mention two important things here. 1. I generally dislike the basic RPG leveling system, so Hogwarts Legacy has really stacked the cards against itself when it comes to my opinion on it. 2. For the sake of fairness, I have to mention that the leveling is not the only way to progress. There are side quests which lock the learning of new spells behind challenges you have to complete, like growing specific plants or using specific potions. These are clearly meant as encouragement to engage with the differing gameplay loops. In isolation, there's nothing wrong with that, but I still cannot believe that learning spells is delegated to a side quest activity in this game, and furthermore, that the overwhelming majority of the magical spells you learn are only useful when killing other people. However, my main complaint remains. At the very least, Hogwarts Legacy doesn't commit the grandest sin of RPG leveling systems, making the upgrades you get with them completely meaningless numerical upgrades, like dealing 10% more damage. They tried to make them genuinely interesting skill trees, and an update added the option to refund abilities if you find them useless. You can try something out and get rid of it again if you don't like it. You might think that at least a leveling system is more easily ignored than a gear system. On a surface level, you're right. I don't need to venture into the menus to equip a new item every time I open a chest, just every time I gain a level, which is much more rare. In addition, the skills you can unlock are helpfully grouped into areas like stealth, dark arts and such, allowing you to quickly filter for what you want. Also, Legacy doesn't level gate regions, so you can fully explore everything in the pace you desire, unlike other open world games. The problem is that while this system causes much less pain on the menu front, it instead causes much more pain in the world. Because you have a level, now every enemy needs a level. Quests are gated with levels, locking a sometime meaningful story experience behind a damn number that doesn't mean anything. I dislike leveling systems because at their core, they fail at making me believe that I am more powerful. That funny number doesn't make me more powerful, because at the end of the game I need a similar amount of damage to kill basic enemies as I did at the start. Besides, the most powerful weapon that you have, you unlock right at the start, when you learn that after filling up a magic bar you can just insta-kill enemies, and oh hey, wanna lob this explosive barrel at them? What makes me feel more powerful is learning new skills and using them against enemies that you couldn't defeat before, or that allow you to defeat enemies much faster. Boy, I sure wonder where in this game I could learn new skills. Perhaps it's some sort of arcane academy? Sorcerer's school? Now, if you've played the game, you might recall the side quests you have to go through to unlock spells, and that's valid. However, those side quests are not only boring, they also are completely detached from the actual spell that you are learning. I learned the freezing charm by having to throw out a set number of plants that fight for me in combat. In addition, as cool as learning new spells is, beyond a few limited ones, most of them don't solve gameplay problems. Beyond Wingardium Leviosa, which is needed for a lot of environmental puzzles. The reason they don't solve any of your problems is that the game equips you with color-coded spells pretty much immediately. It has to, because otherwise it would be presenting you with enemies that you technically cannot defeat without your telepathic throw, since you can't get rid of enemy shields. And since the game tries to balance the colors out, spell cooldowns never were a problem for me. Instead, you do some silly tasks that have nothing to do with the spell you're learning, and then you get to draw a line on the screen and boom, you've learned the spell. In 99% of all cases, it doesn't do anything for you. It feels less like a school and more like a theme park where you go through the stations, wave your wand around, and tada, it's done. By the end, I was swapping between spells mostly at random, as the only thing that really matters is the color of the spell, and for one particular type of enemy, that you hit with fire occasionally, which you'll probably be using anyway because the fire spells deal heavy damage. The spells don't promote different gameplay styles, and the game doesn't force you to adapt for new enemies because everything is so vulnerable to fire anyhow. Later in the game, the cool combo system it sets up for you at the start with floating enemies in the air and then throwing them around and such barely works anymore, because it throws so many enemies at you that you simply have to deal with them in the most efficient way possible, because you can barely cast as it is between mashing your counter and dodge buttons. In parts, I can understand why you want the gameplay to be simple and recognizable from other game studios like Ubisoft. As I said in the intro, a lot of people who don't play games are gonna play this game, and Ubisoft makes a lot of cookie-cutter generic games. You can see their fingerprints all over Hogwarts Legacy despite this game having nothing to do with Ubisoft. On the other hand, making the game resemble something from Ubisoft isn't making it easy for the non-gamer. It's making it easy for the game designer. I cannot believe that so much creativity has gone into the design of the world, while what the player does in it is so incredibly lazy. What this game needs is actual enemy variety, where different enemies require different tactics out of the player. It needs reasons for you to learn new spells and clever ways where those spells solve problems for you. Then, the learning of spells becomes your progression. In Metroidvania fashion, parts of Hogwarts could be locked to anyone who has not learned these spells yet, coupling mechanical progression with the thing that people have come here for: exploring Hogwarts. In defense of Hogwarts Legacy, the game does really have one job to nail: making Hogwarts special, magical, and fun to explore. It at least nails making it beautiful. The influence of the movies comes out in the fast-fire design of the spell system, but it really hits home when you look at Hogwarts. This is Hogwarts from the movies, and that is a good thing. The fandom might have nitpicked them to death, but they are genuinely good films, and they aced a lot of the stuff, one of those things being the set design. It's a good call to copy them. Hogwarts is big, and there is plenty to discover here. The side activities that you can complete feel like the greatest hits from the games. You can fly a broom around the spires of the castle, you can tame a hippogriff, and it has a lot of nooks and crannies which are fun to explore. It reminds me of going through a theme park. Did I say that already? Well, never mind. Unfortunately for me, that feeling of being a pupil at the magical school that touched me so in my childhood faded away after the first few hours. Let me reiterate. The castle is beautifully realized. You can see that an endless amount of passion was poured into it. But the uninspired nature that poisoned the gameplay and turned it dull also made Hogwarts lifeless. You don't feel it at first, running with your character through the halls you imagined in your childhood, and the game presents a good facade. Students fill the halls. There are plenty of lovely details around you that hide it. The armors on display move and cough, the paintings are alive. But as I moved about and started to accept the first few side quests, I realized that nothing here actually lives. That it is truly a facade. That it really is just a theme park, not a virtual rendition of a living world. Students offering you side quests stand in place the entire day. Most of those side quests are dull fetch quests with little to no story attached to it. The little puzzles strewn about Hogwarts, most of those are copy-pasted so that the magical sense of discovery that is the entire point of an open world fades after the second or third time. The fun animations that occasionally play in your vicinity, pretending like the castle is alive, after they're done, the students drop everything and continue their randomly generated paths like NPCs because they are NPCs. And the game is barely pretending that they're not. There is a day and night cycle, but you can't simply walk around the entire map at night, even in the castle, which clashes against the 1 or 2 missions that are actually set at night time, where you have to sneak around, and it clashes with so many chapters from the books where characters snuck out after curfew. It makes me believe that there used to be an actual sneaking system, which was eventually removed. Instead, you can just wait in any place for it to become day or night, just sitting there. Sometimes I barged into a professor's office in the middle of the night and had to wait there to continue a quest, sitting down and playing through a time skip animation until it became day and they reappeared. You cannot interact with 99% of the students. They are completely invincible and unreactive. They are set dressing. They do not inhabit this world, they are background actors, and you attacking them is going off script.
Professor Darcy might be too young to be a professor, but she's more than capable. Knows her gillyweed from her gurdyweed, that one.
Madam Kagawa's getting a bit of an easy run of things. Drapendo! British being cancelled.
And have you
Arresto
seen
momentum.
professors look at your
Confringo!
Black looks at
That's not necessary.
Hogwarts Legacy is not a sandbox because sandbox games give you a set of tools and rules and then tell you to go wild. You cannot go wild in Legacy. You can't do anything really. You can't get on a broom inside the castle and have staff chase you down to force detention on you. You can't attack fellow students because this is your Draco Malfoy arc. You can't buy something funny at Zonko's and play pranks on teachers. You can sneak into places that you are not meant to be, but considering that I have walked into a professor's office while they were in it, stolen something out of their chest that was locked while they were looking at me, it's not something that I'm not meant to be doing. Worst thing is, there is a game out there that's already done it. Rockstar's Bully is an open world game set in a boarding school, and it's a fantastic game, and it embraced being a student rather than just being a terrorist hunter disguised as a student. You have multiple factions with the nerds, bullies, preppers, greasers, jocks and townies, and while the interactions that happen in the player's view are just as scripted, you can actually interfere when a bully attacks a nerd. Plus, the social interactions have consequences, like the bullies attacking you on sight if your relationship with that faction is too bad. Bully is a fictional, highly satirical take on a boarding school. But it succeeds so much more than Legacy in making the school feel like a real place, and a big part of that is that a lot of the writing is more grounded. Your quests are all about escorting people so they don't get harassed, delivering packages, throwing stink bombs into lockers and running away from the teachers. The teenagers, despite the satire, feel way more like people than a single character in Legacy ever does. They even manage to simplify down the school timetable enough so that it feels like being at a school without constraining you. You wake up at 8, classes start at 9 and go to 11, and then from 13 to 15 o'clock. Classes are just mini-games that take 2 minutes at most, and you can skip them entirely at risk of being caught by supervisors and brought there if they spot you. There's a lot of gameplay here that you can reuse to make Hogwarts feel like a school without making it feel like the wizard equivalent of playing Arma. In contrast, Legacy is so disappointing. The castle looks great, but after about an hour of walking around in it, it becomes stale because the visual spectacle fades. I attempted to play Legacy once closely after release, but I dropped it after about 6 hours. This time, I knew that I had things to say, so I forced myself to finish it, and this video really is the only reason I did. The devs had a real chance here to do something special. Since most open world games are advertised on size, because people generally are stupid and bigger number better. But Hogwarts Legacy was always going to be about Hogwarts. They could have made a small open world with an incredible depth to it. They had the resources to do it. Instead, they decided to make it huge and as shallow as a puddle. Like, what the fuck is this? People are here for Hogwarts. Why the fuck am I playing in an open world game with outposts and dungeons that I get to clear and loot? You had free pass to make something that is not seen in video games. A small open world that is highly reactive to the player because all you needed to do was Hogwarts, Hogsmeade and the Forbidden Forest. Derelict castles and Skyrim dungeons is what you came up with instead? Why? I can come up with justifications as to why most of the gameplay is the way it is. I don't agree with them, but at least I can. But this big open world no one cares about, I have zero understanding why this is here. Is this open world meant to simulate the pendulum swings in Focus in the Fantastic Beasts movies? Oh, this is a movie about a guy traveling the world saving magical animals. Oh wait, this is actually a movie about Dumbledore and his relationship with Grindelwald. Never mind actually, back to the magical animals. This is a game about being a student at Hogwarts. No, hold on. You're actually an explorer traveling the world, defeating dark wizards and making it safer. No, hold on actually. Back to Hogwarts. Never mind actually. Don't you want to really stop the dark wizards in that castle over there? You totally want to go there because you currently aren't in the way better castle of your childhood dreams? I understand the vital need to keep things accessible. But Zelda, Breath of the Wild, is also accessible. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't feel like it's designed with accessibility in mind. It feels like the devs equated a generic open world with accessibility because that's what the games that everyone buys use. But that's not true. The devs wanted to be accessible, but I fear they only ended up being uncreative. I wish I could tell you the story makes up for it. It doesn't. The story of Hogwarts Legacy is where it becomes clear that the intent behind the game was not to create a slice of explorable wizarding world, but really just a theme park that the players can run through, do all the things that Harry Potter did, and then go back to their life. We don't just have our greatest hits and side activities, no. Our main character is yet another chosen one, who is special in every way, successful in every school subject, and immediately adept at everything shown to them. The choices offered in conversations are inconsequential. There is no branching narrative, even though the game claims to be an RPG. The characters are lifeless, and the central conflict not compelling. The villain is two-dimensional, and frankly speaking, I hate how grand in scope this story is. I was bored 1 quarter in, begging for it to be over halfway through, and frustrated by the end. The story feels sterile, designed by committee. I wish I could tell you that the side quests are better, that there is some salvation to be had, but there's not. The entirety of this game is bland. It's not there to say something, it's there to serve a purpose. It is uninteresting, inoffensive, it does not make you think, feel, or remember any of it. It commits the gravest sin of writing. It's neither good enough to be celebrated, nor terrible enough to be laughed at. It is simply boring. In their effort to create a Hogwarts theme park, the devs made every character as interesting as the cardboard cutouts telling you how tall you have to be to board a ride. And perhaps it is good enough for the fans that just want a theme park ride through their childhood. It probably is for the most fans. Maybe all of them. Legacy's reception certainly seems to indicate as much. But I refuse to believe that when given the option, people would pick a more boring story over an exciting one. Harry Potter has a lot of problems that the author refused to or lacked the ability to resolve during the publishing of the main series or after it. In fact, in some cases, she's made it worse. A number of these are very severe, like the institutional slavery present in the wizarding world, and also the depiction of goblins. The main plot of Hogwarts Legacy feels like a writer reckoning with those systems, and then it passed through 15 subcommittees, watering it down. Let's get into it. The game begins with the player character shortly before departing for Hogwarts. Due to unexplained circumstances, they are starting at Hogwarts in year 5 and have been receiving private tutoring from Professor Fig to get them up to speed. For reasons I don't remember, but which are probably the same reasons I had to look up Fig's name again despite playing the game for 48 hours, you take a flying carriage to Hogwarts instead of the Hogwarts train. During the ride, you are attacked by a dragon and end up being teleported to Gringotts Wizarding Bank by Portkey. Using the key, you access an old vault in the bank and are introduced to ancient magic, a rare form of invisible, powerful magic only the protagonist can interact with. A goblin named Ranrock interrupts you. He is the leader of a goblin rebellion fighting for equal rights of goblins to humans, but to immediately remove all nuance from this loaded statement and then to solidify that they are indeed an irredeemable villain, he immediately kills the other goblin employee who let you into the vault because they dared to question his judgment.
Sir, they have the key to the vault.
Choose your next words wisely.
I only meant that the instructions to Vault 12 were quite clear. Sir, I must insist. I was to grant access only to one with the key, and you didn't have it.
I have no patience for traitors.
After escaping and getting to Hogwarts, Fig begins researching ancient magic. It helps that his late wife was deeply interested in the topic. Together, you locate the map chamber, an old, hidden room deep underneath Hogwarts. In it, 4 portraits are gradually filled with the Keepers, long-dead Hogwarts professors, one of which had the same gift to interact with ancient magic that you did, and who all vowed to keep it a secret due to its destructive power. However, because their last pupil abused that power, they do not immediately reveal what they know. The location of the result of that abuse, a repository of extracted negative emotions of hundreds of people, which the pupil literally inhaled to become more powerful. Because of her refusal to stop, the Keepers killed her at discovering this, and each of them devised a trial you must pass before getting all of this information. However, even the Keepers put you on fast track because you are so special and reveal Ranrock's rebellion to them. During the game, you find out that Ranrock is also looking for the repository to utilize it as a weapon. Along the way, you also befriend a goblin named Lodgok. You also find out why there were attempts to kidnap you. Since you can see ancient magic, Ranrock wanted to use you to find the repository. In a pivotal scene in the middle of the main quest, he also becomes more extreme. Previously, he had no issue working with humans to further his goals, but as he finds out that Lodgok, his own brother, knew where the repository was all along and kept it hidden from him, he reacts violently. He kills Lodgok and severs his alliance with a dark wizard, shifting his goal to the eradication of all wizards instead. The climax of the story is an all-out attack on the cave system under Hogwarts, where the repository is and you have to defend it. Ranrock gets to it first and uses a stolen wand to blast it open, inhale all the power inside it, and turn into a big dragon which you fight as the end boss. He kills Fig, you defeat Ranrock, and that's it. You get a choice before the fight to either restore the repository and keep it a secret as the Keepers instructed, or inhale it to gain maximum power. But besides an additional few seconds in the final cutscene, neither choice has an impact. I did find it funny though that choosing to take the power, Fig protests as if keeping it a secret is still an option when a damn army is attacking Hogwarts to take it. The first thing you'll notice that this sounds both elaborate, grand and boring at the same time. I'd like to tell you that it is my abbreviation making the plot boring, but it would be a lie. I don't spend time elaborating it in more detail because it is uninteresting. The second thing you'll notice is that this plot feels very familiar. You, a pupil with special powers, attend Hogwarts, during which there is a great evil plan in progress which, if successful, would destroy the world as we know it and replace it with something evil and incomprehensible. Incidentally, the plan has you at the center of it all, not because of a special relationship with the antagonist, but because of an ability you were born with. A central question for the first half of the plot is, why the fuck the antagonist even wants you? What I'm trying to get at is that they are attempting to redo Harry Potter, but change enough around so that a customizable self-insert is at the middle of it all, and then you get to enjoy the theme park ride. In the end, nothing is said about the systematic issues of the wizarding world, despite choosing to write a main story which has them at the center. From the very start, Ranrock and his gang are depicted as raving terrorists who will kill anyone in their way. I feel like the writers wanted to deal with the baggage of the Potter books, but an accident ended up replicating the problems instead. In the same way that Dumbledore, on the offhand, mentions the treatment of non-humans in the wizarding world, but nothing is ever done about it, the game makes the issues central to its main plot, but then utterly fails to deal with them. In the same way that one of Harry's final thoughts in the books is about his slave making him a sandwich, you put down the rebellion and nothing changes. The only reason you are the good guy is because they made Ranrock so comically extreme that he doesn't care about the murder of children. I don't like the Chosen One trope for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that it usually leads to a heightening of stakes, because the Chosen One must be the Chosen One for an important reason. You don't become the Chosen One to return books to the fucking library or something. You become the Chosen One because you are the one that saves the world. This has two severe consequences. 1. You know that you are going to succeed because you know that the world isn't going to end and wizard kind not eradicated in the final quest. The plot becomes less about if you will make it and more about how, which reduces tension and increases reliance on characters you connect with, of which Legacy has a sum of 0. 2. Due to the higher stakes, the villain has to be elevated to want to change the world drastically. They must become more extreme, more driven to do anything to accomplish their goal. It is possible to write interesting characters this way, but much fewer compelling three-dimensional characters live in this field because they have not been utterly consumed by their goal. Imagine if they had written Ranrock as a much more sympathetic villain who might use violence, but not as a first resort. Rather, he's been driven to violence by a system that doesn't respect him as equal and fellow goblins that are happy with it existing in their niche and who rallies behind him in the goblins that want more. But we can't have that, because that would be an interesting story asking dangerous questions. It gets in the way of the theme park experience. Imagine if Legacy actually made good on its RPG promise and allowed you to agree with his demands for equality and join him. I wonder if to some extent this wasn't the case. Legacy is full of the remnants of cut content. I touched earlier upon the few side quests which emulate you sneaking out of the castle at night, and I believe this was supposed to be in the whole open world, not just in a few quests. Because of a specific kind of collectible that you can only collect at night. The quest giver goes into great detail about he, as a Hogwarts student, used to sneak out all the time and never got caught. The collectibles, if boring, are clearly supposed to push the player to get out at night when there might be consequences for doing so. But at some point, that system was cut and what remained is just collectibles. There are similar instances of this with the side quests, and I think the main quest was originally imagined as the same, but then the devs ran out of time, because I just can't imagine why they would choose such a story if there wasn't the original idea for you to actually have the ability to switch sides. The game was delayed once, and launched in a technical poor state, which indicates that the devs made it just across the finish line without delaying again. It's so unfortunate because the effect is that all this really terrible stuff happens and it's just presented without further comment. It permeates the entire game. Until now, I've talked very little about characters because they all bore me. Every NPC is basically a plot device. The antagonist that has to be villainous and want to take over the world, the sidekick that you meet throughout the game and that gets killed by the villain, the professor that mentors you. They are all shackled to the main plot, but there are a few exceptions. However, most side characters exist to give out a side quest and have a minuscule amount of dialogue to support it. The overwhelming majority of which are boring kill and fetch quests, and a few are mildly interesting puzzles. However, each house gets a character that goes through an entire little story. Oh, never mind. Just chuck it on the pile with all the other missing shit. The houses that don't get slammed into a locker together with a stinking potion get a character representing them with a series of quests that tell a continuous story called relationship quests. I was really hoping that for once Slytherin would not get associated with dark magic, considering all the valid criticism that has been made about it by now. But at the same time, it is definitely also the quest where the most work went into. They even gave the quests matching names. And unlike the main quest, I feel like it actually tries to hit emotional beats, so let's get into it. The Slytherin questline begins by you overhearing an argument between two students, Sebastian Sallow and ominous Gaunt. Naturally, you, a stranger, can impede on this personal argument and ask what it is all about. And naturally, Sebastian tells you about this private topic. Gaunt, his best friend, comes from a long line of pure-blood wizards, and if the name sounds familiar, it's because Gaunt was a named Death Eater in the original books. Because of this descendancy, which Gaunt despises, he nevertheless knows a lot about the secrets of the castle, like where to enter the scriptorium of Salazar Slytherin himself. Ominous does not want to help because he's traumatized from his parents using cruciatus on him after he refused to do the same to muggles, apparently a fun family hobby for the Gaunts, and as such he is extremely wary of dark magic. Sebastian is the opposite. He really wants to find it because he's looking for any scrap of knowledge on how to cure his twin sister Anne from a curse, something that all mundane healing magic has failed to cure so far. It is this drive, this ambition to heal Anne, that pushes this narrative forward and around which everything revolves. You end up convincing Ominous to show you the way despite his reservations and find a book in the scriptorium which Sebastian takes with him to investigate. Immediately after, Ominous changes his mind and tries to argue Sebastian out of pursuing this further, and this is a common occurrence. After almost every quest, you have to talk with Ominous about his reservations on what's going on, convince him to keep feeding you information, or apparently one of the conversations can even result in Sebastian casting Imperio on Gaunt to make him forget something. With this undercurrent, Sebastian discovers a lead to some ancient artifact in the book, and you chase it down to some forgotten catacomb in the countryside, close to the village where Anne lives with her uncle and caretaker. Ominous follows you and confronts you about it, determined to not let you leave with the artifact, but you once again convince him to keep going along with everything. As you exit the catacomb, the Goblin Rebellion attacks the village, and Sebastian ends up using Imperio in plain sight on a goblin, charging at Anne to make him kill himself instead of hurting her. Their uncle spots this and banishes them from the village, threatening to report Sebastian to the government if he returns. This doesn't deter Sebastian to attempt to use the artifact to heal her curse, but that comes at the cost of some dark sacrifice. Sebastian contacts Anne by owl and she agrees to try it out, but only on the condition that Ominous is in on it since he knows his stuff. Sebastian reacts to this by heading back to the catacomb with the relic unknown. Ominous discovers this, hits you up, and you chase him down through a dungeon swarming with the undead, which Sebastian seems to be controlling to some extent. You confront him, but before you can resolve the situation, his uncle enters the scene, destroys the artifact, and you engage him in combat for some reason. In the end, Sebastian kills his own uncle using Avada Kedavra despite it being wholly unnecessary. Anne joins in, destroys the book from the scriptorium, and teleports away with the corpse of her uncle. In the end, Anne and Ominous cannot decide if they want to report Sebastian for the murder and leave the decision with you. It doesn't have much of an impact, other than a final conversation with either Sebastian showing remorse or Ominous wondering if you've made the right choice as Sebastian faces trial. I'm not going to engage in the lazy poking of obvious plot holes like the fact that the uncle's murder should have most definitely been noticed by others and raised questions, or that the fact, when Sebastian used Imperio on that goblin, a whole lot of other legal spells would have been better suited for the task, and instead try to analyze it for what the devs were trying to do. It is very obvious that while Sebastian's motives are good-hearted, they are also equally egoistic. He wants to save his sister, but he also wants to know more of the dark arts because they are a fast track to power. The writers try to execute a gradual shift to more extremism here, where Sebastian talks himself into delving more and more into the subject for the sake of his sister, when it, at the very least partially, is for himself. The casting of Imperio demonstrates this, which is why it actually isn't a plot hole at all. A large number of other spells would have worked there, but Sebastian, in the moment, used Imperio, which shows a lack of respect for how serious these spells are, and an attraction to using them. Later, you can chat with him about it, and he justifies it to himself as being necessary, and the same impulse shows up later when he murders his uncle, an action he immediately regrets, but cannot take back. Incidentally, he cannot take back that Imperio cast either, considering he makes the goblin fucking kill himself, but alas, goblin lives don't matter or something. Nevertheless, it's this slide downwards fueled by good intentions that the devs were going for here, and from an analytical perspective it sort of works. It's clunky, the emotional beats don't land, which has the unfortunate consequence of the dramatic violent swelling scenes appearing funny rather than sad. But the attempt at tragedy is there. At least, that's how I would read it with the benefit of a doubt for the devs. If read at face value, then it gets worse, because the entire layer under the plot of Sebastian desiring power doesn't actually exist and I'm interpreting too much into it. It reintroduces some plot holes that are somewhat fixed by my interpretation, like why he used Imperio on the Goblin despite a ton of other legal spells being a better fit. Sebastian is also the avenue through which you can choose to learn the unforgivable curses. Now these are separate from the color-coded system, and they are appropriately strong as expected, plus the killing curse actually always kills, which means that the game doesn't commit the grand sin of neutering the unforgivable curses for the sake of game balance. Legacy instead commits the grand sin of making them forgivable. Because of the unreactive world, you can cast these curses in front of anyone. Pupils, staff, Hogsmeade inhabitants, no one cares, which really sealed the deal for when it came to the feeling of nothing mattering. They are just abilities on a cooldown that you can use like anything else at your disposal. Avada Kedavra isn't even special because of the ancient magic executions. These are supposed to be spells which, upon casting them just once, earn you a lifetime imprisonment. Instead, I'm throwing out Avada Kedavras like I'm Dumbledore giving points to Gryffindor. Poppy Sweetings represents Hufflepuff. As the name implies, she's a kind soul who loves animals, and you can meet her during one of your magical animal classes. Her questline centers around protecting wild animals from poachers. You track their camps to an illegal dragon fighting ring and end up rescuing a dragon. The poachers take their revenge by raiding the house of Poppy's grandmother, who raised her and from whom Poppy got her love and interest for animals. The grandma is fine, but the poachers steal her research into an extremely rare magical bird, the golden snidget. Poppy's grandmother didn't know exactly where to find them, but she was narrowing down the search, and after a few expeditions into the Forbidden Forest, where you connect with a centaur called Doran, you track them to an abandoned mansion. You are surprise attacked by the poachers, but the centaurs come to your aid and you find the snidget's nest, and Doran vows to keep them safe. There is an undercurrent in the plot where all other centaurs of Doran's herd don't trust you and Poppy, equating all wizards as poachers, which they realize is wrong when they come to your aid and see you fighting them, which makes them look really stupid, unfortunately. But it is what it is. The devs try to push the sentimental angle by having Poppy's parents also be poachers. She ran away from them as a young girl and has lived with her grandmother ever since, wrestling with what her parents are doing and how this reflects on her. While one might regard this way of thinking as silly, remember that Poppy is like you a fifth year and is between 14 and 15 years old. This is exactly the age where teenagers start emancipating themselves from their parents and form a sense of self in a bigger world. Poppy does what she does not just because she believes it is right, but because she also feels the need to atone for the sins of her parents. Out of the relationship quests, I connected with Poppy's the most. I think this is because my threshold to start rescuing cute endangered animals is low, and one of the easiest ways to align my feelings with what the game wants me to feel when doing something is stopping other people from hurting cute endangered animals. Nevertheless, there is a real disjoint of the relationship quests to the rest of the game. Protecting animals is one of the game's major activities, and yet running around the world and collecting them is not connected to Poppy at all. She doesn't visit you in the room of requirement to see your animals. The tools for the rescuing are given to you by the house elf managing the room of requirement for you, which is just fantastic. Thank you, slave. You end up rescuing 2 extremely rare animals, with one of them being a damn phoenix, and you can't even tell her about it. Poppy works because she is a simple character, and you need simple if a character doesn't have much time to shine, but there would have been easy ways to rope her into the larger protecting animals activity. And yet, out of all the things you do in Legacy, I felt that Poppy's quest was the most appropriate for a YA adventure. The main quest is too grand, the Slytherin relationship quest too severe for adults not to get involved, the Gryffindor one is just more killing dark wizards, but fighting poachers feels like the sort of thing that a bunch of unruly teenagers would take up their time with when the larger wizarding world clearly doesn't care. Plus, when the story is meant to be an afterthought in a game, it's best to select an antagonist that is basically universally hated. The Gryffindor relationship quest centers around Natsai Onai, an exchange student from Zimbabwe, who followed her mother to her new post as divination teacher. Out of the 3 relationship quests present, hers is the most forgettable one because it doesn't really have anything to set it apart. Sebastian gets an ambitious grab for power for altruistic reasons and engages with dark magic. Poppy is centered all around magical animals and hunting poachers. Natty gets a mix of both. Her quest line revolves around defeating a dark wizard. He is dangerous, but not dangerous enough to be involved in the main quest line. While theoretically he is the second in command to the main human antagonist, but that guy never mentions him, and either way he's not relevant to the main quest at all. But because of the mob, poaching is as much of a business as extortion. They do both, so you end up raiding castles, but on one instance rescue a hippogriff pair and flying across the countryside as the Hogwarts Express rides in beneath you in a very picturesque, very fan-servicey little sequence. I loved it. But that's the sort of thing that Poppy should be doing with you. Poppy even introduces you to the hippogriff before you rescue it later. Through a series of forgettable quests, you work your way up in defeating the second in command, and Natty shares with you why she and her mother have moved all the way to Scotland from Zimbabwe. Her father died protecting Natty during one of their customary ride-outs back when she was 9 years old. Natty feels a massive amount of guilt over this and blames herself, and nothing's been the same ever since, which is why her mother ended up taking the job offer to get away from it all. When you fight the boss, he ends up firing a curse at you and Natty jumps in the way just like her father did for her years ago. Since she does not blame you for her own injury, she gets to experience her father's sacrifice from his point of view, which makes her realize that it's not her fault. Natty makes her peace with what has happened. Natty's questline doesn't have anything special in it. You fight dark wizards and goblins both in the main quest and in open world play all the time, and like the other relationship quests, the character doesn't have anything about it that makes her interesting. Poppy at least has the hook with the animals, and Sebastian gets a lot more character interactions, so while they don't work, there's at least an attempt there. Natty, of course, cannot win the award of most forgotten character because that goes out to Amit Takar, the character set up for the Ravenclaw relationship quest, which was very obviously cut. You could at least argue that it fits Gryffindor, but hunting down poachers with Poppy and delving into crypts with Sebastian also requires bravery. It's all heroism and fighting dark wizards and guilt over her role in her father's death, and I just don't care, because nothing is done to make me. As always, I'm not interested in spitting out a bunch of complaints, ending the video with a reference to a patron I don't have and leaving it there. Instead, I'll talk about how I think Legacy can be improved. Legacy suffers severely from an open world that is too big. It needs to be scaled down severely to just Hogwarts, the Forbidden Forest and Hogsmeade. Hogwarts itself is visually wonderfully realized, but like the whole game, it lacks depth. Take all of that energy spent on creating everything around it and put that into the castle. This ancient castle with so much history should have unique secrets and challenges hiding in every corridor. Creative applications of the spells you learn should uncover those secrets and help you solve them for pieces of lore. You can do whatever you want with magic, so make it more pliable than what's in the game. Think of immersive sims like Dishonored or Prey, how they give you tools that change how you interact with your environment. Legacy lacks that, and I think exploring Hogwarts should be fun and interesting instead of feeling like a checklist where you tick off one item after the other. There should be Easter eggs everywhere that have a unique unlock condition, not a collect-a-thon of axioing pages. And if you tell me that novice players wouldn't get that, I'd tell you that novice players are a blank page you can do mostly anything with. Even axio it. You teach them to be observant, and eventually they'll start looking at Hogwarts like a playground. What Hogwarts Legacy needs was the Koro Seed riddles from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and if you tell me that Nintendo of all companies doesn't make video games with casual players in their mind, you're just objectively wrong. So don't tell me that this idea isn't welcoming to casual players. Don't rely on Revelio to tell the player what to do. Let them actually discover it. Some people will miss things, but that's the point of a secret. Train your players to explore with their eyes open and the community will do the rest. Online discussions, short videos, all dedicated to finding something for the first time. It will work. Any YA story is going to require a suspension of disbelief, because it often revolves around teenagers and children handling situations they should never be handling in real life. The Harry Potter books were the same, and each book needed to find a justification why the adults were not notified once the plot was ongoing, and additionally, often the premise was questionable. Remember the challenges protecting the Philosopher's Stone? I mean, the book even starts with the headmaster telling every student where the MacGuffin is located. Ignoring the main trio, there's hundreds of teenagers in that room right now in the middle of puberty. Telling them not to do something is the ideal thing to do if you want it done as quickly as possible. With that said, Legacy shoots past that immediately. Already in the tutorial you're killing people, something that the series treated with extreme severity. And it goes further still with its big civil war plot. It's not right, and it doesn't fit the fantasy of being a Hogwarts student. The plot of Legacy needs to center around Hogwarts because everything needs to center around Hogwarts. To sell players the idea that you are indeed a student at Hogwarts, the biggest focus should be on the side quests. Think about games like Witcher 3 with its rich and wide array of side quests where NPCs that you can only meet for the duration of the quest had character, and where the little choices you made built the player character too. You know, like in an RPG? Witcher 3 too required suspension of disbelief, but it centered around the urgency of the main quest while you were fucking about with side quests. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't have memorable characters, it doesn't have a memorable anything. Ironically, that's what you need if you want to have a legacy. Here's an example. One of the earliest side quests I discovered was given to me by a Slytherin called Zenobia. She introduced herself as an avid player of a game called Gobstones, which centers around throwing balls as close to a target ball as possible, like the real game Petang, but with the added functionality that the balls spray the loser in some sort of stinking potion. Zenobia says the bullies have hidden her Gobstones around the castle and then asks you to find them. The game then adds a bunch of circles onto your minimap in specific castle areas, and the player character helpfully reminds you, every time you enter one of these areas with a voice line in the tunes of, "I should look for Zenobia's Gobstones." The Gobstones are hidden in odd places, but always ones you can see with the naked eye, and no further challenge other than mashing Revelio, which you are doing permanently anyway, and Accio is needed to grab these. You return to Zenobia, she thanks you and says she'll return to her house chambers immediately to go play, and then instead runs off into one of Hogwarts' many courtyards to stand there forever in a Gobstone playing idle animation, because she is an NPC and not a person, and at no point was there an attempt to make her into something more. At least she didn't immediately despawn in front of your eyes like a Force ghost. Let's take this quest as an example and apply the principles of RPG game design to it. Your choices in this quest are to take it or leave it, or at the end, not return the stones to Zenobia or make her pay for them. This needs to be improved. First of all, a quest that sends you on a simple collectathon to places over the castle is a good idea because it gets you to explore. During that exploration, you would ideally come across more quests. The fact that the locations of the stones are just pop up in your minimap is disappointing. No one except the bullies would know where those stones are, so you should be able to confront those bullies in various ways to find out where they are. Head-on confrontation should be an option, or doing quests for them in exchange for the locations, or talking it out of them, or blackmailing them. What if the bullies were persistent characters that outside of this quest appeared in other places as potential enemies, quest givers, or allies? This will likely be one of the first quests you do, and I suspect many players would opt to attack the bullies head-on. What if hitting them hard here would make them withhold help in a later quest when you need it? Inversely, if you did other quests first, what if your interactions with them were changed how they would react to you in this quest? You know, like in an RPG? Imagine if this approach was taken with every single side quest. Imagine if such a network of side quests with consistent characters replaced the entire storyline that's there. I think if you design these characters strongly enough, you can dare to omit a main questline entirely. Because Hogwarts Legacy is not about making the player a cardboard cutout copy of Harry Potter with some details changed. It's about letting you experience what life is like as a Hogwarts student. Hogwarts' population should not consist 90% of nameless NPCs. It should consist of people whose lives you can meaningfully influence. And the way you influence this network of people should be what the game is. Worst thing is, Warner Bros. Games, the publisher of Hogwarts Legacy, patented a system like this from a different game they published. In Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor and War, nameless cannon fodder enemies can become named, more dangerous mini-bosses if they manage to kill you. These enemies become persistent in the game world, and you can track them down to get your revenge. This is titled the Nemesis system. WB Games patented it, and it was never seen again anywhere else. What if something like the Nemesis system was expanded to include positive relationships as well? Instead of dying, you would get knocked out and wake up at the infirmary. Games are at their best when the narrative considers failure an option, because failing is something that happens a lot in games, and it's often the most immersion-breaking thing. Imagine if you helped out Zenobia, and she actually had a persistent schedule as a named character, you know, like in a school, and some shit went down near her, and she would join in to help you dynamically. Or not. Or maybe against you, if you really pissed her off. The school should be full of characters like that. Students that you can interact with, ghosts that can inform you of secrets, teachers that act like police and parental figures in one. Please, dare to be something else. Don't copy Ubisoft and use the medium that you have chosen to your advantage, instead of making yet another piece of media that is just consumed and thrown aside afterwards. To me, it seems like in Legacy, again and again, approachable gameplay was confused with approachable game design. Oh, add levels in your gear system, that will make it an RPG, right? Oh, the main mechanics should be a Ubisoft open world game, that will make it easy to play for casuals, right? A lot of games are killed by unclear direction. The amount of subsystems present in Legacy, the amount of dungeon delving and world exploring you do tells me that someone integral to setting the direction of this game was torn between making a game set at Hogwarts and a game set in the wizarding world, where you roam about and kill dark wizards and other nefarious creatures. I don't know if development was hindered by time pressure, publisher meddling, or inconsistent direction. Legacy had to be delayed at least once, and to this day, its technical state is troubled. I recognize that my suggestion is a radical departure from what Legacy is. It might be too complicated. Clearly, most folks are happy with what they received. But I think that Hogwarts is naturally perfect to do something like this, because it's extremely contained. It's small in scope, so you can add depth. Widening the scope is the wrong thing to do. Don't copy Ubisoft, creating an ocean as deep as a puddle. Instead, make a game as small as a well, and as deep as one.